Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and today I'm joined by the board member, general manager, and jack of all trades for KSK Beveren, Robin Beck. Robin, how are you doing? It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hello, nice to meet you. And I'm doing quite well, quite busy in the mid-season, but everything is going well, I think. So thank you for inviting me to your podcast.
Good. Thank you very much for coming on. It's an honour to meet you, and it's
really good of you to dedicate your time to come on and speak to us today, Robin. So thank you very much. As I mentioned, Robin is a board member at KSK Beveren above all else that I mentioned. So first of all, Robin, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Well, for most clubs now it's vacation time, but for us as a club, as a board member, it's always a bit of quite some work. So it's more work between two seasons than within the season, because when the season starts, it's like, okay, we play a game every week and it's the players' turns to make the best of the season, and we just look on and hope they win. But between two seasons, it's often making progress in certain parts of the club. So it's a lot of work that we need to do. But it's nice, it's a good weather in Belgium right now. So that's nice. It's a nice summer feeling right now. And I'm looking forward to the next season. So everything goes well.
For this episode, we are going to be covering Belgian club KSK Beveren, but they have a few different names and there's a few different facets to this story. Who better to have on the podcast and discuss this with us than Robin Beck? I think it's fantastic that we've got someone inside the club and who was instrumental in running it over the last few years and getting everything up and running again. So
to kick things off, the original club, as far as I'm aware, were known as Standard Beveren, and were founded in 1922 by a local businessman. Now, one thing that's very fascinating about football in Belgium, particularly for me, is the matricule numbers, which are basically a form of registration number for Belgian football clubs. These numbers are intrinsically tied to the identities of clubs as well. And, they're basically a part of the club's historic fabric. We'll touch on them a little bit more later on. But to start off, Robin, can you tell us a little bit more about the matricule numbers? Because I find this really, really fascinating.
Yes, I think it's quite unique in the world. So I think they started it, the Belgian Football Federation started it in the early 20s, and they gave a number based upon the date of foundation. So the oldest club in Belgium is the new champion of Belgium, Royal Antwerp Football Club. So they have number one. They're also quite proud about it, and truly deserved. So they are the oldest club, so they are number one. Our number is quite high. It's 2,300. There was the team that you mentioned before. They were dissolved in 1929, so they had another number. And then 3 years later, there was some kind of reunion of these players, and they started a new club, which is the club that still exists today. And they had number 2,300. But for every club, the number has a special feeling. It's like a badge or a crest or the club colors or the stadium in some regard. So there are quite some. Most clubs and most fans are really passionate about these numbers. And when you go bankrupt or you merge with another team, you often lose the number. And that was something that we didn't want back in 2010, and we fought for it like 10 years to get it back, or to start playing again under the number, and now we have it back. So for us, that was quite a great moment. But it's quite unique, and it has no further use than just something like a license number of your car, something like that. It's quite the same. So it's quite special. It's quite unique in the world.
No, it certainly is unique in the world. I think that's the best way of putting it. It's just really interesting for me anyway, from a heritage perspective, because it adds this extra layer of club identity, which the supporters are just as passionate about representing and defending as the clubs are, more often than not. It's a really fascinating little kind of subplot, I suppose, to this story as well. But as you said, I think off air, the original club were given the number 737, but then they folded and reformed and were given the number 2300, which we'll certainly touch on a bit later on.
There is also a downside about this number thing. Like, you are always being accounted for, like, do you have the number or not? So when you don't have the original number, you are kind of seen as a fake club or a club that merged. So what happened is that the Belgian Federation, they saw an opportunity in it, and they decided that you can buy a number as well. So if you give enough money and show that you have some kind of connection, which is quite subjective,
Sure.
you can buy your old numbers. Or, like, one of the examples is Beerschot. I don't know if you know that club. There's a second club from
Yes.
Antwerp, and they like merged 2 times already, and a couple of years ago they just bought their original number back. And so many people say that's wrong. Other people say, like, yeah, if you they are the original club, so they feel like represented by this club, and it's normal that they get the number back. Other fans, like definitely fans from Antwerp, will say, like, no, you just bought yourself your history back, but you're not the same club. So it's kind of a downside. And if you don't own the right number, it seems like you're doing something wrong, and that's maybe the downside of the medallion. It's like it gives you too much strength in some regard and too much pressure to get the number. That's what I think about it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic. And I suppose, and again, this is from an outsider looking in. Seems that maybe if there's a club that's maybe fallen in some kind of financial hardship for one reason or another, but maybe they're quite well liked or they're well loved or something. Maybe if there was some way that they maybe fought back to raise funds and it was community focused to buy their number back, it might put a bit of a positive spin on it, perhaps. But then on the other side of it, it's like, well, if clubs that are just being pumped full of money can just buy one of these numbers.
Yes.
It's kind of two sides of a very unique coin.
Yes, that's true.
So just for the avoidance of doubt, Robin, the KSK Beveren that you're a part of, you see, is the one being founded on the 23rd of July 1924, yeah?
Yes, in 1934 there was the reunion of the old club, and in retrospect it was the first game of the newly formed KSK Beveren, which was then called the K in KSK stands for, it's royal. It's like Royal Antwerp. Antwerp uses the English name, but in Dutch, royal means koninklijk, and the K comes from koninklijk. So you get it after 50 years. If you are celebrating your 50th birthday, the federation grants you the royal title, and that's the reason why it's now called KSK Beveren. And when we were started, it was called SK Beveren.
Okay, nice one. Thanks very much for confirming that. Contextually moving forward in this episode, that detail particularly is going to be quite important. But you've got off to a flying start in any case and ended up winning 2 back-to-back titles for what I believe at that point would have been your regional leagues, yeah?
Yeah, it was a strange period. It was right in front of the war, the Second World War, and it was very local level. So these after the war, there were also some changes in the competition standards and stuff like that. So I guess when we really became successful was right after World War II.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the beginning we were just a very local club. We just had a playing field, which you can imagine was just like a field where normally cows do their thing, stuff like that, and just formed a football team on it. And then we got I think in 1939 or something, we moved to the stadium.
Yeah, and that stadium in turn became named after another local businessman who then took over the club. I believe his name was Frederick Tielemans. I'm guessing it's still the name of the ground today, or at least traditionally anyway. I don't know if it's got like a sponsorship name or something now.
I've been told that the current owners of SK Beveren, so the professional club, they do not intend to sell the name as well, because a lot of clubs sell their names. It's the same in Britain, I guess. But it's quite a special name. A lot of people don't really know where the name is from, so they think it's some kind of word, but it's just like contracting Frederick with Tielemans and put together. It's very simple, but it's a catchy name,
Yeah, no, it certainly is. Yeah, no, you're spot on there. But as you mentioned, after the war, the team continued this really, really strong upward trajectory that they were on. They were flying up the divisions. But at this point, it was still pretty regional, though. And a lot of, there's a big sense of locality at this point within football in Belgium, particularly the further down the divisions that you went. So, with it still being pretty regional and pretty local, I'm guessing that there was a lot of players in the team from the local area. Would that be fair to say?
No, actually, during the 50s, we promoted to the third division, like you said, but then we fell back as well. We didn't have any major money, and we just set up the players that were coming from the youth division. So like players in that time, you must know, there was not like something like a football academy. It was like, oh yeah, I'm 10 years old, I want to play football, and they had like 4 or 5 youth teams, and they just started playing. There was nothing like a scout, like scouts or something, or like a network of people who went to get talented players from other teams. So there were actually it was quite fair. It was like a battle between local teams. They lived in a village and they started playing for the team of the village. That was quite it. There was nothing like making money out of transfers. I think the first player that moved away from Beveren was at the end of the 50s. He went to the clubs from Antwerp, like Beerschot and Antwerp. They were quite big at that time. And they bought one of our players. That was the first time that a player from Beveren moved to the big city, like they say. And then at the end of the 50s, we relegated again. So nobody really thought that we were going to be a big club.
Yeah, no, I know, and I get what you're saying there. What's quite good is that the club actually did stick to the principles, though, with giving local youth a chance, and I think it done a lot for you in the long run, particularly the period of your golden years or your peak or whatever you'd like to call it. And all things considered, you've managed to build a really, really wonderful side.
To be honest, it's kind of one of the miracles of modern Belgian football that happened beginning of the 60s. So like you said, we relegated, and I think about 7 or 8 players, they came through from the youth ranks, or like they were 16 years old and they were available to play for the first team. And of these players, two players would eventually become they would win the Belgian Golden Shoe. Wilfried van Moer, who was together with the other one is Jean Janssens. So Jean Janssens was he stayed at the club until he retired, but Wilfried van Moer went fairly quickly. He went to bigger teams like Antwerp, and then after that Standard de Liège. But he won like 3 golden shoes in a row at the end of the 60s. He was like, if he would play right now, he would be transferred to teams like Real Madrid or Barcelona or stuff like that. He was one of the best players in Europe.
It's very impressive.
Yeah, and he just started playing because at that time, like I said, you lived in a village and you started playing for the team because it's before the Bosman arrest. So if you wanted to buy a player, even if he was without a contract, you needed to give them a lot of money. So a lot of clubs didn't manage to get the best players from small teams because these small teams, they asked for a lot of money. So they stayed for quite a long time. But what's quite special about this generation is so Wilfried van Moer, he had his father, he had a pub, and it was in the village of Beveren, and it was the pub was close to a sand pitch. So like just a terrain filled with sand, and it had kind of the size of a football field. So they, instead of going to the football academy, they started their own little academy. So all the best players from the village, every evening they came to this sandy pitch. And in Beveren, it's still in existence, and they even put up a monument of some modern art shit. Like, it's not quite lovely, it's quite ugly, to be honest. but they called it het Congoken. It's a reference to the Democratic Republic of Congo, which at that time was a colony of Belgium. And for some reason, they thought all the pitches in Congo were like sandy, which is not the case, to be honest. It's quite a green country because it's on the equator. So, but they thought it was like how people played in Africa, and they called it like that. And it's still a major thing in Beveren. Everybody knows what you're talking about when you mention that particular playing field. And it was also the playing field where, for example, in later years, Jean-Marie Paf, the goalkeeper, stopped his first penalties, to say so. So, and from that team in the fourth division, I think 7 or 8 players managed to get in the highest division, and I think 2 or 3 were even there when they won their first championship. So it's quite an amazing story, which is not thinkable in these times. So that was a major lift in success. So they sold Wilfried van Moer for quite a lot of money to Antwerp, and with that money they strengthened their squad. And together, and the other big player is really Jean Janssens. He's like he won the golden shoe, and there's a crazy story about him that he was asked to get the trophy in Brussels, and he just told them like, I can't make it because I need to work at the docks. So he didn't really like all the publicity around it, and that's kind of like the identity that we took on in that period. Like, we are a normal club, amateur players that just play the game and are not worried with money. So that's the era that we got our reputation that we still have today, I might say.
Yeah, it's very community centric, and I think that's what I quite like about it. Like the stories you've just told there, the stories of some of the players going from the lower tiers of Belgian football to then being able to go all the way up, winning the golden shoe, and even things like that, being able, saying that you can't make a trophy presentation because you've got work and stuff like that. It's something that you would never think footballers would do today. Like, it's a fantastic story.
But at this period in time, the club entered one of their most successful seasons, and I suppose you could probably say one of the most successful spells as well, because it really, really paved the way and laid a lot of foundations for what their most successful season would be. It was in 1963-64 when they went to league unbeaten, scoring 111 goals as well, and then finished third in their new division while also going on a pretty decent cup run. So the club is starting to become pretty competitive and really starting to become part of the footballing landscape in Belgium, in a sense of the competitive nature of the team. So, the players that you brought in from the youth had really started to gel with the sounds of things.
Yeah, that was one part. The other part was that we sold Wilfried van Moer to Antwerp, so we got quite a lot of money for it. And then I think we bought like 5 players that were experienced, that had played in the first division. And one of the most important decisions of that era as well is the appointment of a new coach. So we got K.S.K, who would become one of the most successful coaches in Belgian history. So he was the manager of the national team in 1986, when Belgium was fourth in Mexico at the World Cup. So he came to the team, like you said. It was an era but because before the 60s, there wasn't really. Coaching was not that important. Often, even at lower league clubs, there was like the board who said who needed to play. So and that's something that has changed after World War II, but it really changed in the 60s. Then everybody started getting coaches with degrees and stuff like that. And K.S.K was very important for Beveren in that period, together with the already talented team. And then they were merged with very experienced players, and then it went very quickly.
Yeah, it certainly did go very quickly. And the club eventually made its way into Division 2, actually. And one of the club's favourite sons, manager Guy Thys, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, then went on to manage Belgium to a 4th place finish in the World Cup as well. So it's an incredible time for the club from Beveren and all the fans. Obviously I'm kind of cautious to about the name that I'm using for that. But there was some really, really positive stuff coming out of the club at this point in time. Then, of course, you guys made it to the first division. Tens of thousands of fans were attending games, so Beveren were attracting a great amount of interest at this time. I mean, it must have been some feeling and some buzz that was around the club just now.
Yeah, I know quite. My father is from 59, so he attended these games, and the relationship with Anderlecht is also a special one, because when we were a growing club in the early 60s, they called us Little Anderlecht, and it was a name that stuck for the rest of the history. So the games against Anderlecht were always very special. It was also a game. Anderlecht is a team with a lot of how do you call it? They love to play champagne football. That's how they sell it. To last couple of years it was not the case, but they still have this thing about them that they are like the Real Madrid of Belgium, and then they played against a working class team as Beveren, so it was really quite a rivalry, but a friendly one. But like you said, it was quite a time. It was also a time when everybody in Belgium went to football games. So every club had a lot of attendances, which is sadly not the case anymore. But in Beveren, it was very special because Beveren is a really small village. I think right now there are like 40,000 people, or no, that's too much, maybe 30,000, I don't know. But at that time it was like maybe 10,000 people lived in it, and they filled the stadium of 18,000 at times. So yeah, it was a great atmosphere, I can imagine. And they played great football at that time even. It was not like we always played some kind of technical game. We were never like playing Scottish football, to say. So no kick and rush, but it was quite a lovely game that we played, and all the players, they were from the village, so everybody came to the stadium to see them perform.
Well, ultimately, though, the best was yet to come, because the club stabilised in the first division, and then you actually played in a kind of precursor version slash, it's a kind of like unofficial tournament, I say in air quotes, to the Intertoto Cup, which was called, I believe, the Rappan Cup.
Yeah, back at that time it was called the Rappan Cup. It was kind of the same thing. It was quite basic. It was like you needed to go by train and stuff like that. So it's the same system with the Intertoto Cup, which was, I think it's ridiculous. If you ask, who won the Intertoto Cup in 1996, you need to say 6 names of clubs, and then they were able to participate in the UEFA Cup. So it was like a friendly tournament. But it was a nice experience, I can imagine, for these players at that time, because traveling in general was not very common.
Yeah, I know it was kind of one of those ones, kind of like a pre-season tournament in some senses as well. But Beveren eventually qualified for the Intercity Sphere Cup, so a big step up at this point in time. And then the Rappan Cup again, so you were really, really testing yourselves against some really, really decent clubs.
Yeah, sure. And I think it was a great preparation for what was coming in the Intercity Fairs Cup, because there we were really successful. So
yeah, absolutely. Very, very successful indeed. And this is, again, really kind of reaching the best period of the club's history, I suppose you could really argue. Because obviously, as we said, you were playing in the Rappan Cup, which is kind of like a nice wee, not maybe so much pre-season tournament, but a nice wee practice session, if you like, of what was to come, for lack of a better term. And then got into the Intercity Sphere Cup. I mean, you beat Austrian opposition, and then I suppose probably the biggest shock, even within Beveren's history at this point, comes up. You beat Spanish giants Valencia, and I can imagine even at that point in time you were given absolutely no chance in that fixture.
Yeah, to be honest, we had quite a special reunion last April. This year we participated in the Phoenix Trophy. I don't know if you heard about that. You should look it up.
It's I think I've heard about it before. So I'm right in saying that it happens yearly, and it's for semi-professional and amateur football teams, but
Yes.
it's kind of like a European club competition, but it's sort of to promote, sports within the community and community
Yes.
activism and stuff like. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic,
Yeah. So
a
so
fantastic promotion of that.
we were drawn in a group with FC United of Manchester. So we played in Manchester
Ah,
last year, and the other team was a team from Valencia. It's an amateur team from Valencia, and they read about our history, and they saw that we beat Valencia in 1970 or 1971. I'm not sure. And then they decided to arrange 4 of the former players that played in these games to give the official kickoff of the game in Valencia. So we were there for the game, and there were like 4 80-year-old former stars of Valencia who started the game for us, and then we won with 2-1. So that was a nice reunion, actually, and I fondly remembered coming to Antwerp because we played the game, our home game in Antwerp, because the stadium of the Vreetil Stadium didn't have sufficient lights, so we needed to play the game in Antwerp. But the most it's really a legendary win in Valencia. So you need to know, like, at that time nobody ever heard of Beveren.
Exactly, and along with winning at the Mestalla, you managed to draw the return leg at home and beat them 2-1 in aggregate. Overall, a really, really, really special and historic story there.
Yeah, it was an incredible story because the guy who scored both goals, he's not that famous. He came to us in the second division, but most older fans, they still know his name because of that feat that he did in those 2 games. So he died a couple of years ago, and he was really a very gentle and friendly man, and a very humble man. So yeah, that was amazing, and the team, if I'm not mistaken, was coached by Alfredo Di Stefano, so it was also a legendary manager as well. So and basically they didn't even know who we were, so it was a big shock.
No, of course, it was absolutely huge. And it was a fantastic underdog story, if anything. But unfortunately, you then drew Arsenal in the next round, and despite managing a draw with them at home, you lost at Highbury. But I might add, not embarrassingly, but it did sadly see you leave the tournament. I'm just curious, are the games and are this cup run remembered in Belgium, or at least amongst Beveren fans? Because you did mention there, you kind of had a special reunion then, but it's all well and good saying that, the really hardcore support who are involved with the club have reunions and memorialise this game, but is it something that's remembered, I suppose, in Belgium as a whole?
Well, I'm not sure it is. That's also a thing. Like, if I'm going to England or Scotland, they still know the brilliant wins that happened in the 20s or 30s or whatever. That's not the case in Belgium. I think people that are old enough to know these times, they still know it, and sometimes on our social media we make references to it, and then you see, like, okay, even young people, they like it because they know, okay, Beveren beats Valencia, that must have been quite something. But I think the most memorable game that everybody knows in Belgium and especially in Beveren is the win against Inter Milan a couple of years later. But the game in Valencia is often forgot about. I don't know. I'm not sure why. I think it's very difficult, to be honest, to even find footage of that game. Football is now so commercialized and everything is on television. But at that time, it was just like, okay, you listened to the radio and looked at the newspapers. But it was not like right now. And many people, tend to forget these brilliant moments.
suppose, and as we'll get onto as well, because of the complex nature of what ends up happening, it's maybe one of these things. It's, could it be shared memories? Could it not be? Does one club or one part of the club have any right to this memory than the other? So it's something that we'll get on to talk about.
Because then in 1977-78, you won the Belgian Cup, which in turn got you into the Cup Winners' Cup, and this is where the famous win against Inter Milan actually took place. That was in the quarterfinals, and once again, you weren't given a chance, but Beveren pulled off probably the biggest upset of the tournament.
Yeah, what happened? It was a crazy season, to be honest, because it was also we took our first Belgian title that year. What you need to know is at that time, I think we had the best goalkeeper in the world. We had Jean-Marie Paf, who would go on to be a goalkeeper at Bayern Munich. But besides that, we still had an unknown team. So I think Jean Janssens and the center back, both center backs, they came from the third division, fourth division even. So they were there early in the 60s, end of the 60s. And now we just bought two German players. One of them was like 1.90 meters high striker, Erwin Albert, who would become the top scorer that year as well, I think. And then there was this playmaker, Heinz Schönberger, who was he came from a second division club, and he was just brilliant. He was like the glue in all the team. He just was like, the playmaker, sort of Andrea Pirlo type, not really quick, but very good vision, very good passing, very intelligent player who perfectly know what everybody around him was doing well and what their strengths were. And we just kept on going because we were fighting on both sides. We were in Europe, and at the same time we were playing for the title in Belgium. So we went to Inter Milan, and I think Inter Milan was not the best era of Inter Milan. I think they were like second or third team at that time. After that, they had a better era. But the thing that went wrong for them is it was just a lack of respect. They were not humble enough. I remember that my father said, like, when we went to Italy, we were put in this cage in the stadium, and they were not really friendly apparently as well. And they were then they drew. It was one of the best games that Paf ever played. He basically saved every single ball that came into his area. And then afterwards they came to Belgium, and they were complaining about hotels and stuff like that. And then when the day was finally there, I think it was the 21st of March, which is also the birthday of my father. So that's why I know so well. Without anybody knowing, it started snowing. And so the Italians who were used to play in the sun, they suddenly needed to play in the snow. And that wasn't in their favor. And we played a brilliant game that day. And I guess like 10 minutes before the end of the game, we scored the winning goal. And that was it. And it was amazing. They even they built an extra stand for more fans. I think there were like 20,000 or 22,000 fans that day. So every single team, every single person who loved football was applauding Beveren that day, because they didn't really have like opponents. They were a small team, so everybody was cheering for them. And they just took the opportunity. And to be honest, I think because I saw the next two games against Barcelona, I saw them live a couple of times, and I think we should have gone to the final and win the trophy.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, that's where this incredible story comes to a bit of an end, and in the worst possible way, because it was essentially two penalties which dumped you out of the competition, which is a massive shame. I mean, it was against Barcelona, you know, and there's no shame in losing to Barcelona, but you did create chances against them. Now, I think controversy's a bit harsh, but you know, there's some debate over whether the penalty should have been awarded. You know, it's one of the tournament favourites playing, you know, understandably one of the tournament's, you know, underdog stories, but the one that was expected to get dumped out at the first time of asking, sort of thing. So it's a David and Goliath type story. So, you know, there's debate over whether the penalty should be awarded, but there's still no shame in losing to Barcelona. But again, given that he's had chances, it's a bit of a sore one to take, you know, just one of those ones. But it's still something that you guys should be taking a massive amount of pride from, because you actually put up a fight against them, you know. And then after the disappointment of that, the club pretty much bounced back and ended up winning their first title in 1978. But this is when they also underwent the name change to KSK Beveren, isn't it?
The name change it's just the official name of the village, Beveren was, and they just took the was off because it was too long and too old-fashioned. So it was not a merger or something.
Yeah, no. It's just a change. It's just a name change. There's no merger or anything that kind of follows that. Just a name change, but you know, sadly there was no European run this time. Despite winning the title, of course, the club would have been involved in the European Cup, or what is now the Champions League, so the highest tier of European football you can be playing in. But sadly, there was no European run this time in the European Cup. They were put out in the first round by Servette from Switzerland, I believe. But the club then won the title again the following season, only losing 5 games all year. So again, a really, really good period for SK Beveren and their fans.
Yeah, it was quite unexpected. If I take a look back in regards, again, I was not born at that time, but what happened is like the best players left actually after the first title. So Paf went to Bayern Munich. The older players that were there for like 20 years, they all retired. We lost a couple of players to Anderlecht. We lost our coach to one of our arch rivals, actually, to Lokeren, which was a team that was putting a lot of money in their team at that time. So they were pushing to get titles, but they didn't manage to do it, luckily. But then, yeah, we needed to rebuild our team, and I think the second team that won the championship, I think that's more of a surprise than the first, actually, because what you often have in small clubs that have a golden period is they win one trophy and then it goes down. But what we did was quite special, because the board managed to strengthen the team even more after the biggest players left. Again, it was not with really famous players. They were not like big money transfers, and they just they to give you an example, we bought a player from Standard de Liège, central defender. He was like 33 years old. We just said, we need some experience in the back. Let's put him there, and it worked, you know. And then there were some other young players that came to the ranks. Our goalkeeper was Philippe de Wilde, which was also keeper of the Belgian national team in the 90s. He was, at that time, he was 17 years old, 18 years old, and he needed to replace Jean-Marie Paf, which is the hardest thing to do at that moment. But he did brilliantly, and we won the title again. So that was quite special. But it was also, I think that second title was also the beginning of the end for us, because after that we tried to stay, and we did we tried really hard. We put a lot of money in it, money that we maybe didn't have. And then there were some real changes in football as well, you know. The whole game was professionalized. There was a big scandal in Belgian football in the early 80s when there was like corruption and black money. I don't know if you know the concept. Is it the same in English? Like illegal money.
So like dirty money.
Yeah, you don't pay taxes on it, stuff like that. And so they did this big investigation, and from that point on, it was, before that it was all very loose, you know, your team and somebody gives you some money, stuff like that. And then in the early 90s there was this the Bosman arrests. I don't know if you are familiar with that. For that, you couldn't do transfer. When contracts expired, the player was still property of the club, even if their contract expired, and you needed to give money to the club. So that was the reason that many small clubs who had big talented players could make a profit out of it. And since that trial, it's no longer possible.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that trial obviously had a huge impact on the landscape of football and the transfer market as we know it today. You know, that is really a massive defining moment in the history of football. And I suppose a move towards modern football as well, you could argue, but that's maybe a different podcast for another time. But as you said, this was kind of the start of the downward spiral for Beveren, sadly, and eventually you were relegated, and the glory days seemed a million years away at that point. And then when you finally fell down to the third division, the financial troubles really started to come to the fore around 2011. And at this point, things start to get a bit murky and complicated around here, don't they?
Yeah, maybe one period. So in the 90s, it was not quite good, and we got really financial troubles. But we managed to stay in the first division for quite a long time. I think we relegated twice, but we re-promoted. And then in the early 2000s, we were really on the brink of bankruptcy. And then we made a cooperation agreement with this French football director who had a football academy in Africa and in the Ivory Coast. And then we started playing with Ivorian players. Some of them became world stars like Yaya Touré, Eboué, Gervinho, players like that. So really amazing players. But like you can imagine, it was quite how do you say it? It was a situation that couldn't last forever. Was kind of something of a window of opportunities for this French guy, but he got some great knowledge about football, but he wasn't really caring about the club. So for him, it was just a nice club to put his players, present his players to European football, and it worked because he had one of the most fantastic football academies that were ever made in African football, and he had some world stars in it, which is really, really great for him. But for the club, the money for the players that he received, it didn't come back to the club. And then there were some internal fights between local board members and him. And to be honest, it really went it really went bad. And then afterwards, when he left, there was not really somebody who had the financial ability in this modern football world, because then we are talking about 2007, 8, which really meant the explosion of football in on a professional level. Like now in Belgium, I think 75% of all clubs on a professional level are in foreign property. So there are like investors from all over the world. At that time it started, and we didn't jump on the right train, or had the financial capability to compete with these other teams. So it just went down.
Yeah, I mean, sadly it really did. And there's a few sides to this story as well. So it can get a bit complex. There were mergers, stadium moves, a new club formed, and fans unhappy that the matricule number had been taken. I mean, Robin, you of course were privy to all of this taking place and involved now in one of the clubs that came out of this whole mess. So I'm quite happy for you just to explain to myself and our listeners your side of the true story, if you like, of what happened with the club.
So maybe to make it easy for you, so what happened is actually indeed, so the Red Star Waasland club, who played in Sint Niklaas, which is a neighboring village of Beveren, They were financially very healthy club, but they didn't have a lot of fans. In the other village, Beveren, there was a big club with a lot of fans, but no financial health. So they needed money. And because of political reasons, because it was a new stadium and stuff like that, they made a decision which might be financially or economically quite not that dumb to merge. Actually, they didn't merge. What they did was the club from St. Niklaas moved to Beveren and changed their name. And they still have the same number as the old club from St. Niklaas. The number, they changed their name, they changed their colors. They went to play in the stadium of the Vretil Stadium. And from the beginning, they were quite successful. Actually, I think they promoted in their second year of existence, and then they stayed in the first division for like, I don't know, 10 years, and then they relegated two seasons ago. But like you said, there was a group of fans that didn't want that because, like I said, merging in Belgium, you lose some part of your originality, you lose your number. It's like, in my opinion, and the guys who started the club, it's kind of cheating, you know. We have this saying in Belgium: when you burn yourself, you need to sit on the leaves. It's a word saying. It means like, if you do something wrong, we did nothing wrong, but the board did things wrong, then you need to take the consequences. And for us, merging was an easy way to do that, and we lost a lot of originality because of it. Because you need to know the merger story in Beveren. Beveren is a very small club, and there were merger stories for like 20 years. And most of these merger stories were with our arch rival, which is Lokeren. And that people protested against it. There were big protests against it. And then they kept on protesting, and they said like, yeah, we don't care. We even want to relegate to the third division as long as we do not merge. And then above our heads, this merger was accepted. And even fans of the merger club, which is now SK Beveren, because you say there are two sides of the story, which is completely true. But even fans, they can't deny that at that time, merger was not popular. They didn't want to merge, but a lot of people said, okay, it happened, we can't do anything about it, and at least we still play on a professional level in our stadium. And that's what happened. And then there was there was a minority of fans, like around 500 or something like that in the beginning. And they said, we don't want to merge, we don't want to lose our originality, and we rather go to the lowest division in football, start our own club, which is run by fans, which is a very big part of our project, that we don't want to put our fate in somebody else's hands. And we just say like, we just want to protect our heritage. We want to keep on playing football without being put in somebody else's hand. And we did that. And what happened with the old club, the old number, they kept on playing with ladies. So they kept their ladies team. One of the reasons was that because of the Ivorian players that we had years before, they were very talented, and there were quite some debts on the old club. And some of the former investors, some of the board members, they still had money in the club, and they wanted to retrieve the money. And by selling players like Yaya Toure, we get a percentage of the sum. And then because of that, some of the debts could be paid off, which is good, of course. But then at some point in 2018, all the debts were cleared. And then we said, okay, there are no dads in the old club. Let's revive the old club. And that's what YBSK Beveren did. So we started to work together with the ladies team. We kind of merged with them, which is strange, but it's like divorcing your wife, but you're still in love, and then you marry her. Yeah, that's basically what we did. And now we are back being the former club. We didn't buy the number like some other clubs. We just waited our turn until the time was ready. And then we merged. And I can't speak for the other side. My own father, he goes to the games of the other team as well, the professional team. So I don't have anything against the fans. I don't have anything against the players. Surely do not have anything against the stadium or the colors or whatever. But I do have something against the way not only this club, but other clubs are being run, because it still is the same thing. You put your fate in somebody else's hands, and you just hope that they are good board members, that they are good investors, that they care about the club. But at the end of the road, everybody cares about their own money. And if you see that your club is making losses and losses and losses every season again, and you just keep on putting money in it in the hopes that someday I will have the best player in the world and sell him for $20 million, or one day I might win the title, play Champions League, which is totally not realistic in this era for a small club. In my opinion, in my humble opinion, it's not possible. And that's why I still, even though today I think the other club is run by a very good board, to be honest. There are American investors, but they really listen to the fans and stuff like that. It's not the worst board that there is. These are intelligent people, good people. They try to communicate with our club, which was the first board that did that, because before that we were just put aside and we were like scumbags and stuff like that. But this board said, okay, these people have reasons to have done what they have done, to have separated from the rest. Let's talk to them. We now have like a cooperation agreement, but to form one club again, for me, we need to have like really strong rules that makes it impossible for owners to just sell the club to whoever they want or make decisions that are not in the best benefit for the club. And that's very difficult to do, because they keep on being business guys. They're American investors. They, at the end of the road, they don't care about the people. They care about the club. They want people to be happy in the club because that's good for their business. But when things go down, they will say, okay, we tried, it didn't work, and we're gone. And that's one of the reasons that I'm still not a fan of the other club. There are other fans who are far more radical, and they say like they're fake and stuff like that. For me, that's not the main reason I don't go watch their games. It's because I believe in a democratic form of football, and I believe in what we are doing, that's maybe the future, and that you need to play on a level that you can be sustainable.
That's it. I suppose it's proven the point that another kind of football is possible within this era of modern football, and it doesn't all have to be fans constantly getting rubbished and dragged through the mud by their owners and their clubs as well. There is something else. There are fan-owned models. There are sustainable models, and in fact, I think like amateur football in Scotland, it's junior level football, or what was formerly juniors, if you want to be technical about it. The lower leagues like the Isthmian division and the leagues below that in England are starting to become really popular for those reasons that we've just kind of mentioned as well. So it is something that is becoming a bit more popular, because I think people are just fed up with what's happening at the top levels of the game, which is completely understandable. Am I right in saying that you guys are the only club in Belgium that's fan owned?
That's correct, yes.
Robin, just to kind of echo and talk about what you've said there, I completely agree with more or less everything that you've said there, and I know in the case of Beveren and the different clubs around Beveren, there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of dynamics at play here. And I think it's one of those complex situations that, you're never going to be able to navigate properly, because there's always going to be something around it, okay? And obviously you said, if all the teams in Beveren were to come together again, then there would need to be rules in place. Everyone would need to be singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. Everyone would have to be on the same track, which might not always be possible. As we've discussed, if board members know that they have a team that's really successful, then depending on the type of board member that they are, they're more likely to want to keep a hold over it. Even if sometimes they're good board members, they can very often then turn into bad board members. Even if they are a good board member, there's still not a democratic process in the way that the club's run by the fans. So there's all these different things that we need to take into consideration. And I think what you've said about community football, particularly, and the process behind the club being entirely fan owned and 100% democratic, I think is something really, really important. And I think it's something that we're seeing a lot more of, kind of moving out of the COVID era, but even before that as well. There's a real opposition to modern football at the moment. And I mean, to be fair, if developments in the last couple of days are anything to go by, I think there's going to be even more of a shift towards kind of community-centric football clubs like that. And to me, it's just real football, and I think that's what's special about it. And I think it's a wonderful effort on the part of yourself and your colleagues to get this up and running. So I suppose moving on to the final part of the story, if you like, 2022 comes around. There was an agreement in place with Vassland Beveren. So Robin, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so like I said, at the beginning, there was really like a sort of a cold war between our club, the fan-owned club, and the newly formed unofficial merger club, Waasland Beveren, at that time. So they were like, what you need to know is that the former board members, they really were proud of what they managed to do with Red Star Waasland, which was a very small team, and they got them from the lowest league to the second league. They were a professional team. They had really good finances. They were really proud of what they achieved, and to be honest, they achieved quite a thing, and then for some reason, they saw it like a real opportunity to say, like, look at what we did, and now we're going to take the former champions of Belgium, we move into their stadium, we change the name, and we still are the boss. Well, that was at the beginning of Waasland Beveren. So they didn't like us at all. Politics didn't like us at all. We were even banned from playing in our own village because they said, like, yeah, you're all hooligans and stuff like that. We went to court for it. We won. Came back to Beveren, proved that we were not hooligans and stuff like that. Of course, every team has some fights. I don't need to explain that to Scottish people, I guess. But no, but we and then it just went into a cold war. People didn't communicate with each other, even on the most stupid things, like, hey, can we use that dressing room because we have a special game? No, you can't use that dressing room. That was not the arrangement with the local community, stuff like that. And then there came like these American investors at the other club. They took over the club from the local investors, who also got a lot of a lot of money because they did some good work doing transfers and stuff, and the Americans bought the club. And the first thing that I wanted to do is rebrand the club, because they knew that a lot of their fans, they were nostalgic about the old club. They couldn't they were not interested in what we did because we played in the lower leagues. They wanted to see professional football, but they still had a connection with the old KSK Beveren, which played in the highest division, which is the original club. And they wanted to get that feeling back. They really hated the name Waasland. They really hated it, and for good reason, to be honest. So the first thing they did was make contact with us as board members of the other club, which was a very good and sensitive move, because they listened to our story. They said, okay, we understand why you were mad, because they took your stadium, they changed your name, stuff like that, which was not very nice to do. But okay, this is how the modern footballing world works, you know. And they told us, like, okay, let's talk, let's put up negotiations of what we can do to each other, who we can be, how we can be friends, how to operate next to each other like good neighbors instead of fighting all the time. And maybe one day we can form one club, if we find each other, you know. And that's how it started. So it was very difficult because a lot of our fans, they were really they were afraid of what was coming. They thought we would sell our souls to these guys just to get back the old Beveren without any of democratic rights for fans. But from the beginning, we as board members and as a club, also supported by the fans, like, you know, the fans decide what happens. So we are just communicating what they want. And so we started negotiations. We told our views on how to run a club, what we want to one day become maybe one club. We want democratic rights, we want voting rights, we want true structural fan participation, like, for example, the German model, 50+1, stuff like that. And they said, okay, that's good. It will not be tomorrow, maybe it will be in the future, but for right now, we want to have a deal as well. And then we come back to the number game. So what happened in 2011 was that the board at that time, which was a club with financial problems, they did not go bankrupt, but they had financial problems. They signed an agreement with Red Star Waasland, and they said, okay, Waasland moves to the Beveren Stadium, change their name, change their logo, and you are not allowed to play under the number 2300 again. That's what the agreement said. So in 2018, when we merged with the women's team, the ladies team, we went to the federation. We said, hey, we got married again. Will you recognize our marriage? And they basically said, at deadline day, they said no, because we just received a complaint. And the complaint was from the former board, the local board of Waasland, who said, no, this cannot happen. We don't want this. So basically what happened is we went to court. Court said, sorry, you signed a contract, you're wrong, you can't use the number again. Then we went into appeal. They said the same thing. And then we were very sad that it didn't happen. And then the Americans came and they said, hey, look, if you want, we can agree that the contract that you signed will be torn apart. And in return, we want you to talk with us about a possible cooperation. And most of all, we want to use the same badge that you use. So we had you can imagine the decision that we had to make. It was very emotional. It was very hard for some fans, because they said, yeah, if we do that, we are back who we used to were. We are the original club, which is great. But at the same time, we sell or we rent out part of our soul. We had a general vote, which was a very emotional night with a lot of screaming and crying and debating. And at the end of the road, 70% of our members, who are the fans, they voted in favor of a cooperation agreement and in favor of sort of a trade between the number and the badge. And we now have the same badge. We are called KSK Beveren, and the other club is called SK Beveren. Play with the same badge. So you can imagine we didn't really foresee this, but it was really difficult for a lot of people to understand what really happened, because, oh, now you're the same club. No, we're not the same club. We have a different name, which changed. Now we're in the 5th league. So if we want to promote this season, and now we go back to the national divisions. So in 10 years time, we promoted, if we succeed 5 times, which is quite good. It's steady. We keep on making progress. We still are doing this fully fan owned. We still don't have any strange investors that think we are some kind of monopoly game. And so we're growing naturally and organically, which is very good. It's sustainable. Of course, it's not easy to find investors, because they don't get power in return. So we are still always, the fans have the last word. So even if you put $2 billion in our club, you still have the same vote as the guy who barely can buy a pint at the game. So
exactly, and that's the model that a lot of people would rather see as well, and rather experience. But sadly, it doesn't always work like that for a number of reasons. But as I said earlier on, this is something that we can talk about on another show, and I think we will at some point. So at the moment, just to finish things up, what's the landscape like with SK Beveren? Are you thinking if you make your way up the leagues, there will be a derby or something like that? Or,
to be honest, I'm not looking forward to that. I think we have at the moment, we have 2 different reasons of existence. I think we should now make sure that the coexistence of our 2 teams, that it stays like this or gets better. And I think maybe one day, if time is right, and you never know when that time may come, we might form one club, but this will never happen when the fans do not have significant rights. And to be honest, a lot of people, they don't really get the point, because it's not only our fans. If we one day work together, then instead of 100 or 150 members like we have right now, might become 1,000 or 2,000, because then all the fans are supporting one team, and then you have a very broad surface of people who have a saying about the future of their favorite club. So I think we are doing this, with regards to every fan of both clubs. At the end of the day, we love the same badge. We love the same colors, we love the same history, except for the last decade, which was for both clubs not really successful. I mean, the successful period is over. It was in the 80s, it was in the 90s, in the 70s, and for most of my life, I just saw bad results, bad management, bad players, some good players, some great goals, some shitty games. I saw everything except success, but I still love this club till till I die. I would die for this club. I mean this. I would die for this club, and I never saw success. And I think that's what football is all about. You love your club, your culture, and you don't want it to disappear. Even if you don't win any games, that doesn't matter. You just want it to be there in 50 in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years. You just want it to be there because it's the
That's
only
it. You want to preserve it and you want to pass it on to whoever your children are going to be, whoever their children are going to be, and make sure that it's continuing to be passed down. Because no matter how small a club is, and no matter how little success they have in terms of trophies, if that's how we're measuring success, they still have memories attached to them, and they're still a focal point for communities to come together. Just before we finish up, Robin, I know you've sort of answered this question already, but am I right in saying that you play in the East Flanders Division 1? Is that right?
Yes,
In
the
provincial
highest.
leagues?
Yes, the highest provincial league. Yeah.
The highest provincial. So, as far as I can see here, you finished in fourth, 51 points.
Yes.
What's the plan for next season? So just to confirm to our listeners before we finish up, Robin is the board member. He's a bit of a jack of all trades really, and a master of all as well. Got his hand in transfers, social media. He does loads and loads of stuff. So part of his job is the planning for next season as well, which he's just coming into. So what's the aim?
Well, we promoted the season before, so we were new in the league, and we almost clinched the title. We had some difficulties with a lot of injuries at the same time at the end of the season. That's why basically we didn't make it. What we did is we kept our players, and we in my opinion we made like 5-6 very strong transfers, and furthermore we added some really young talents to the club so that we're ready to go for promotion next season. And I think that would be a major step in our history. It will prove that, because you need to know there's a lot of money going on also in these lower leagues, in these provincial leagues, and we proved that even fans without major investors, if they're just passionate about what they're doing, if they want to do it in a good way, if everybody works together, then we can do whatever we want on an amateur level, to be honest. I don't think that this system works on a professional level in Belgium at this moment. In England, it proved that it can work, like Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon. I think they have a budget which is comparable with a professional team in the highest division in Belgium. And they still do it or they still did it. I don't know if it's still the same system, but they did it because of their fans, and their fans had the last word. And that's great. In Belgium, it's quite difficult. But we just keep on going, and you never know what will happen in 1 year or in 1 week even, or in 10 years. You never know what happens. So
And Robin, you can tell how passionate you are about the club, obviously from what you say just in the last bit there, and you can tell how much the club means to you, especially how much you want us to succeed, and how much of your time and how much of your life you're putting towards making sure the club's successful. Honestly, it's admirable. And some people might say, for your sins, you're the director of a football club. You have all these things to do, but I mean, it's I envy the position that you're in, because it's something that we've all dreamt about doing, and being able to be the director on a board of a club that you feel so strongly about, it's incredible.
It's not always easy, but at the end of the day, it's
worth it. It's worth it.
But I think that'll do us for this episode. Robin, thank you very much for joining me on the show tonight. This has been a wonderful conversation with the board member of Belgium's only fan-owned football club, and the story of how they came to be. So loads of different things that we can take from this episode. And just really, really grateful that you were able to come on. Of course, if there's a topic that you would like us to cover related to football history or heritage, then please get in touch with us. You can DM us on X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.com. It can be anything related to football, history and heritage, and if you're not too sure what that entails, get in touch and we'll provide you with some details. But for now, Robin, say goodbye.
Thank you, and have a very good night. Thank you.
And it's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.